ground bait, one of them things a lot of people simply put a bit of water in it, mix it up, squeeze it into a bowl, put it in the water, and yep, you will catch a few fish. But there's a lot more you can do with ground bait than just squeeze it in a bowl and chuck it in. And different ways of mixing it and different ways of feeding it will catch your fish in certain conditions or on certain venues. So 3 or 4 little tricks with ground bait from me. Come and have a look here. Believe it or not, these two are exactly the same ground bait mix. It's both sweet marine, but this one has not got as much water added, and that one's got a lot more water added. And as you can see, it's a lot denser, it's a lot heavier. You can squeeze it into a lot more of a firm ball than that one that'll break down quickly, but you can use that to your advantage in fishing. So when would you use a dry ground bait? Well, for me, normally when I want to bring fish into my swim. So a dry ground bait will fizz and break down and pop, and lots of little particles within it, because it's dry, will rise up into the water column. And that's great in deep water or in difficult conditions when you want to bring fish into your swim. So for me, a drier ground bait's good on hard days in deep water and when you're looking to bring fish in. So feeding it dry at the start of a session is sometimes a good bet because it'll bring them in initially. Now, when would you use a wetter ground bait, or when would you squeeze a ground bait harder? A wet one comes into play when I want to feed ground bait nice and soft, and by soft I mean loose. So actually putting it into my pole pot but not squeezing it into a ball. So I'm just placing it into my pot like you would any other particles, and I just give it a little push down, so you've got what I like to call a sandcastle effect. And the reason for that is because when it comes out, it'll plop out into a nice sandcastle, but that won't go to the bottom like that. As it enters the water, it'll break up and plume and spread out over a bigger area, and it'll actually settle on top of any silt on the bottom. Now, a lot of our commercial fisheries have got very soft silty bottoms, and feeding ground bait like that is a great way of avoiding getting fish digging in there. If you feed balls of ground bait too hard, they'll bury in the silt, the fish will follow it down. But wetting your ground bait up to make sure it all sinks and then feeding it loose like that is really effective. Now, a couple more different things. You can also squeeze both these mixes very firm, but they'll do different things. If you squeeze a dry mix nice and hard, not only will that go straight to the bottom, but it will break down fast back into its original form and it'll fizz. So in deep water, a dry one squeezed really hard will break up fast. But if you take this wetter mix that's got more ground bait, more water added, and squeeze that nice and hard, it'll go to like a paste sort of texture. And even if I try and break that down, look, it's very clumpy and very wet, so it does a completely different thing to that. And because it's got more water in it, it won't fizz as much. But a great way of catching a lot of fish when there's loads of fish feeding is to feed some balls of ground bait nice and wet, very, very hard, with a lot of bait in it. And the reason is because the fish know that the bait's in there. There's particles, whether it be dead maggots, casters, chopped worms, the bait's in them balls, but because it breaks down so slowly, little bits breaking off at a time, it'll keep the fish in the swim and keep them working for them particles. So hope that helps you out, folks. The same ground bait mix, one simple one, but as you can see there, there's so many different ways of feeding it. So have a think about where you're going, what you're fishing for, and what you're trying to achieve, and hopefully mixing different mixes in different ways will put more fish in your net. Toodle pip.
If you love these sorts of videos, you can find us in loads of different locations. Don't forget, the goal of me and Rob is to try and give you guys the edge in your fishing. So Rob, where can they check us out?
Check us out, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, the website. We are absolutely everywhere. Check out the website though, anglingedge.co.uk. We are, as Lee says, trying to give you the edge in all of your fishing.